Hello, Michael. Thank you so much for meeting with us today. We're really excited to have you. So, could you please tell us about your current leadership position and other positions of leadership you have held?
Okay. Right now, I am currently the Chief of Staff for Student Government, which basically is right below the President and Vice President of the student body. And I help them from their day-to-day. And then my job also entails helping the directors whose desk you see around you. And they are the directors of various departments on campus. They do a lot of programming and policy-oriented activities. So basically facilitating their endeavors, honestly. So. I was the freshman class council representative for Dillon Hall. Sophomore year I was the vice president of class council. And then junior year I was also on class council. And then that brought me here.
So what advice would you give someone going into a leadership position for the first time? Are there any resources that you would recommend, or what mentality do you think someone should have going forward?
That's a great question. I would say the mentality especially is that you need to recognize your own potential and how you can realize that potential. Like, you should never second guess yourself, because ultimately you learn from every failure, whereas successes are great, I would say that I have learned most of the most important lessons from failing. And taking a risk and saying that you want to do an election or go for that role, you should never let the fear of failing keep you from doing that. So I would say that's the biggest thing. And then,
you have so much experience with leadership, and you are a student as well, so we think, you're very relatable. So as a leader of the student body, what does leadership mean to you?
I think the essential part of leadership is the idea that it first and foremost is a responsibility. You are responsible to your constituents in communicating their desires, their concerns, in this specific case to the administration. However, a key aspect of this is humility. At the end of the day, you have to be humble. At no point are you ever better than anyone else. And I think, especially with our current political system, I think there's a lot of, how can I phrase this delicately? There's a lot of egocentrism, and I think that gets in the way of them performing their jobs. And really, at the end of the day, if you are humble and you just focus on the job at hand, that's really all you can ask for, because in the end of the day you will get things done.
So what are the most important decisions you make as a leader, you would say?
I help Corey and Becca, who are the current president and vice president, with a lot of, when the administration wants a student perspective, they come to them and myself and they ask us for student input, and I think it's very difficult to communicate 8,000 students' interests among 3 people. And no matter who you talk to, we're all going to have an inherent bias. So I think the biggest issue is effectively communicating what is best for the Notre Dame community, in terms of really meeting the potential expectations and making that a reality, if that makes sense.
What are your core values, and how have they formed you into the leader that you are today?
My core values, I would say loyalty is a huge, huge one. Very much so. I'm very attuned to when someone is loyal or disloyal, and I have immense respect for those people that do respect the idea of loyalty, like my friends. And then I would also say tenacity is a huge one, because way too often it's not necessarily apathy, but sometimes complacency in society can lead people to try something and then just forget about it. But like I said, I've learned so much from failure in itself, that I think tenacity is one of the best qualities that people can have in order to achieve their goals, just because of the learning experience that comes from failing.
So what do you think are important traits of an authentic leader? What makes a person authentic in their leadership role?
I think a person, kind of alluding to what I said before, humility is, for me, the number one thing. I'm very reluctant to follow someone that has that air about them that I can't relate to. If I can't relate to you, then why am I going to follow what you're saying? Just because, you're not going to communicate effectively what I would want you to do as a leader. Like, you can't fully fulfill your job if you don't understand your constituents. So humility is a big one. Also, one that I've come to learn about just because of my position is to be very steadfast, I guess, in your decisions. You can't second guess yourself. If a decision is made, you have to stick with it regardless of the outcome, and then you just kind of have to roll with the punches. If it was something bad, then you just have to compensate in some other area, try and bolster your successes. Like, there are ways, again, like I said, failure is a key part of leadership, and it's just how you bounce back from that that really defines who you are.
Have you faced any significant challenges or crucibles, if you will, in your life that have shaped who you are and where you are today?
This is a very personal example. So I grew up in a very conservative Catholic environment, and I really had a lot of trouble recognizing who I was as a person. And when I got to college, I had to recognize that I was, I guess, this is a very personal example, but I was a member of the LGBT community, and that it wasn't I had been brought up in this one mindset, but I had to realize that there are other mindsets that you can live with. And reconciling that with my faith was very difficult. When I got to college, I actually went through a cycle of depression, but at the end of it, it wasn't so much a failure, but it was more of a learning experience of accepting myself. That was a huge, huge part of who I am today. Because I thought by being a member of that community, I was failing my family, my friends, when in reality, they were very accepting of who I was as a person.
Who is your leadership inspiration? Can you name a person who has had a tremendous impact on you as a leader, or maybe someone who's been a mentor? Who inspires you to be a better leader?
I would say, this is an interesting example. It's not a very conventional example of leadership, but when I was in high school, I used to do speech, and for speech you have to collect these examples and apply them to a quotation. And someone I always looked up to was this man in Australia named Nick Vujicic, who was born with tetra amelia syndrome, which basically means he was born with no limbs. Yet he gets up every day, and he's one of the happiest people you'll ever meet. He can play soccer, he can drive, amazingly. And it's really, again, that tenacity, hearkening back to what I said before, it's that idea that, I mean, things could always be worse, but at the end of the day, it's what you make of it. And really just kind of dealing with the cards you're dealt, and then just making the best of it, really. Yeah.
Absolutely. What roles do communication and building relationships play in becoming an authentic leader, in your experience?
Oh, essential. So that's another thing I'm learning right now. Among the three of us here, communication is paramount, because like one person will say one, and everyone is busy. That's the other thing. Inherently, Notre Dame students are always busy. It's hard. It's admittedly very hard to touch base with everyone, to keep a constant, really tally on what everyone is doing or saying. So there have been times when we're not on the same page and we try and do something and it turns out really badly or like really weird. And again, we have to ameliorate the problem. But communication is, at the end of the day, what holds everything together. It's the fabric of any administration, any leadership position. When you communicate with each other, whether that's at the exec level so that everything's cohesive, or just communicating with the other people in, for instance, student government, just so they themselves know that they can have a resource if they should need it, and also so that they really understand what direction everything's headed. Communication and clarity definitely makes people more, like I said, cohesive, and really gets things done.
How do you maintain your and your team's daily motivation and inspiration despite obstacles or setbacks?
I think the biggest thing is bringing that opinion of like a lighthearted mood, or like keeping everything happy. You have to keep people interested. So I try and, occasionally joke around. At the end of the day, we get things done and we sit down to business, but you do need to keep in mind these are people and they're going to burn out if it's all work all the time. You need to show that you are a genuinely nice person, and then people will respect each other if they all know that they're in a community where they can rely on one another. So I would say that's a huge part of it.
Those are all the questions we have right now, but thank you so much again, and best of luck in your current and future endeavors.
Thank you so much for having me.